French President Macron announces a halt of weapons exports to Israel. So we'll start by putting this up on the screen. This is our cover sheet here from Democracy Now!, where I first saw this. I want to say my initial reaction before we kind of get into the details of this, I think this is a massive story. There are some details in here that might seem to minimize the importance of what President Macron is doing, and we'll get to those details here in a second. But I think beyond just the optics, the messaging of a major Western country essentially rebuking the nation of Israel, particularly Benjamin Netanyahu, is a massive, deal as far as potentially putting the pressure necessary on the Israeli government to stop some of the attacks that they've been having on Gaza, on the West Bank, on Lebanon. So let me just say right off the top that I think this is actually a really big deal. But let's get into the details here. This is from Democracy Now! French President Emmanuel Macron says France is no longer sending arms to Israel and called on other nations to halt deliveries of weapons. It goes on to say, quote, when we call for ceasefires, this is the case for Gaza. This was also the case for Lebanon last week. Well, we try not to call for ceasefire while continuing to deliver weapons of war. And I think it's just consistency, Macron said on Saturday, in apparent criticism of the United States. Look, let's just say this. I saw so many people say this over the last several months, over the last year. More notably, we saw Congresswoman Ilhan Omar say this, around the time of the DNC, that if you just want a ceasefire, you just stop sending the weapons to the country because they cannot continue to be doing all of the damage that they're doing if they don't have the weapons to do it. It really is that simple at the end of the day. Stop sending the weapons and you'll create the ceasefire. But, we also had Egypt entering the chat here. They expressed agreement with this, and we'll put this up there. This is from the Egypt Independent, a publication I was not familiar with until now. But they say that here that they welcome Macron's call to halt of arms exports to Israel. And just as a side note here, I want to say that I'm not super familiar with Egypt and their politics, but it does seem a little baffling to me that a nation that borders Gaza directly has not been doing more to help those people. They share a border with Gaza. They could be sending in humanitarian aid. They could be taking in refugees at the very least. We haven't seen anything really to that effect. It has been astonishing to me to see how much a country like Egypt in particular has basically just been silent and missing in action when they could have done so much to help these people over the last year. But nevertheless, from the Independent here, I'll put up on the screen. Egypt welcomed the call by the French president to stop arms exports to Israel against the backdrop of serious violations of international law, international humanitarian law committed by the Israeli army in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon, which resulted in tens of thousands of civilian casualties and injuries, most of them women and children. Going forward, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry confirmed in a statement that the call made by the French president is fully consistent with respecting the principles and rules of international humanitarian law and reflects the general and growing discontent at the international level with the brutal Israeli aggression on Gaza and Lebanon, calling on the international community to implement the call, reiterating its demand for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. I'm glad that the Egypt's foreign ministry brought up Lebanon as well. It is almost getting lost in the international discussion. Does what exactly is happening in Lebanon right now as a sovereign nation is being invaded by Israel? We've covered that a couple times here. In this video, as well as in this video, we've covered just the different things that have been going on in Lebanon right now as far as Israel's ground offensive and their strikes in Beirut. But it's unbelievable to me that we are in real time seeing how Lebanon might just become another Gaza. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu even said as much. We're going to put this up on the screen here. This is from DW News, where, again, France's President Macron saying that Lebanon cannot become a new Gaza. And from this article, He reiterated his concern over the conflict in Gaza that is continuing despite repeated calls for a ceasefire. He said, quote, "I think we are not being heard. I think it is a mistake, including for the security of Israel." He said that, adding that the conflict was leading to quote unquote hatred. And I gotta tell you, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of the state of Israel, not super happy about this. In fact, he decided to come on and just kind of give the French president a little piece of his mind. Here's the clip of that.
I have a message for President Macron. As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel. What a disgrace. Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support. But their shame will continue long after the war is won. For in defending ourselves against this barbarism, Israel is defending civilizations against those who seek to impose a dark age of fanaticism on all of us. Rest assured, Israel will fight until the battle is won, for our sake and for the sake of the peace and security of the entire world.
So if you've watched any of my recent coverage on, everything to do with Israel and the different people that they are attacking right now, it goes without saying that I'm not a really big fan of Benjamin Netanyahu. And so I'll kind of spare you the reiteration of all the different things that I feel about him and his administration. But what I will say, what I found telling was at the very end there when he talked about how his cause, his fight was actually, going to be helping the entire world. It is maniacal on so many different levels that the Israeli government is trying to gaslight basically the entire world in saying that somehow its territorial expansionist attacks are actually good for the entire, population of the world at large. It's mind-boggling to me, like how they're trying to justify what it is that they're doing. Absolutely mind-boggling to me. But again, let me just stress that I think this is a positive thing. I think more countries will step up and they will actively condemn Israel the way that we are seeing now. I think that more people will denormalize relations with them. There will be more embargoes. I think there will be maybe some sanctions that come down. If this really continues, that is what I think we will truly see. France is a member of the G7. Like having them come out and say that they're not going to any longer send weapons to Israel. That's a big deal. I'm sorry. There's no way of getting around it. France did add that and we'll put this up on the screen really quickly here. The government later clarified that it's continuing to ship weapons to Israel that is deemed defensive in nature, and that French weapons constitute a negligible amount of Israeli imports. The U.S. provides Israel with 69% of its arsenal. Germany provides another 30%. Look, it is important to note that what France is doing is mostly symbolic. With that being said, I do not think it actually downplays whatsoever the importance of this. While what France is doing is not going to actually physically stop what's happening, it's more about the message that it's sending. It's the denormalizing of what Israel is doing. It's also, again, kind of like pushing Israel more and more into being a pariah state. So I think that what French President Macron is doing here, while it won't have a tangible impact, I think as far as the larger globally societal question that we are kind of facing was whether or not, like Israel should be kind of skirted off into the corner and being cast as a rogue state. I think that kind of becomes more and more prevalent the more that countries like this make statements like this. Thank you for watching this video of Independent Thought. If you liked the conversation, please go ahead and give the video itself a like, and be sure to subscribe for future episodes on the channel.